The history of disability rights in America doesn't go much further back than the past generation or two. In fact, the term developmental disability didn't even exist until 1970, and it's only through the passing of deliberate legislation that strides like this are made possible. One of the most important acts passed in service of people with disabilities is the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA.
The ADA is a comprehensive civil rights law that was passed in 1990 and later amended in 2008 to further expand coverage. And the way I would describe it is that the ADA leveled the playing field for people with disabilities by requiring the removal of barriers that prevent them from being fully included in society.
The ADA was passed in 1990 thanks to some dedicated advocates who took drastic measures to spur legislators into action.
The ADA was stalled in Congress for 2 years, and so it led to one of the more notable moments in disability history, which was the Capitol crawl, where over 1,000 protesters showed up at the Capitol, threw themselves out of their wheelchairs, and crawled up the steps of the Capitol. And this, obviously, and for good reason, freaked out all of the members of Congress, and it provided the pressure that the community needed for the ADA to get passed.
The benefit of the ADA is that it has given people with disabilities a voice and a path to pursue justice if they face discrimination.
It is one of the most comprehensive pieces of civil rights legislation we have in this country. Bottom line, because it really is the equal opportunity law, but we know that individual behaviors do manifest in discriminatory action. And so that is why, it does provide the opportunity for people to pursue legal remedy if there has been discriminatory actions taken against them.
A lot of times I find that companies and organizations just don't know what all the ADA requires of them. And so once it's brought to their attention, they're usually generally cooperative and they do want to help and work with people. But it is important to note, if you do go the route of filing an official complaint with one of these U.S. agencies, you don't have to have an attorney represent you. They have online complaint systems, so it's pretty easy to do yourself. And so a lot of people think, well, if I do that, then I have to have an attorney, and that's not the case.
There are plenty of other laws which work in tandem with the ADA to provide protections to people with disabilities. Some of the precursors to the ADA include the DD Act and the Rehabilitation Act.
So the DD Act is probably, in my view, the best written piece of federal legislation we have. It provides the Bill of Rights. The title is Developmental Disabilities Assistance and Bill of Rights Act.
In 1973, the Rehabilitation Act was passed, specifically Section 504. And so Section 504 was developed to protect the rights of people with disabilities in any program receiving federal funds. So it wasn't this broad protection from discrimination like the ADA provides, but it was the first step in the right direction.
And the ADA has also been invoked in court proceedings since 1990, like in the Olmstead v. LC case of 1999.
And so it was a pretty monumental ruling that essentially gave teeth to the ADA and solidified the rights of people with disabilities to be in the most integrated setting possible, like we had talked about before. It set community-based treatment and programs rather than institutional-based as the standard by which persons with disabilities should be treated, as long as, one, those services are appropriate, two, the affected person or persons don't oppose the community-based service, and then three, the community-based service can be reasonably accommodated.
One of the most important issues in the digital age is accessibility. The ADA provides some guidelines for how to increase accessibility for people who might be hearing and/or sight impaired.
These businesses and groups have kind of come together and put together some really good best practices, but they're not mandatory. Until we make web design and the accessibility of it a priority, we're still going to have a lot of these discrepancies and issues with using assistive technology.
Accessibility for people with physical disabilities is just as important, and the ADA has pushed for these kinds of accommodations to be made as well. The case of Silver v. City of Louisiana is one example of the ADA being used to uphold the rights of people with IDD, as it permitted a man with a pacemaker to join federal meetings virtually. The most important takeaway from this legislation is that defining and protecting the rights of people with disabilities is a constant process and requires the understanding and advocacy of all people.
We must change the way people think in order to change the way people behave. And so that is why you see a lot of anti-stigma campaigns. Don't look at my disability, look at me. Look at what I can do.
But learning how to advocate is such a lifelong process because advocacy looks different in different contexts. The most life-changing things that I could have experienced as a person with a disability was finding a disability community and being able to interact with other people like me, and seeing other people who were older than me living lives determined by themselves and by their own desires and by their own wants and not dictated by anyone else.